just been connected to the largest spiritual network on the planet, The Jeffrey Daugherty Show. Jeffrey Daugherty. Sink or swim, deep end information, parabiblical research, spiritual technologies, personal empowerment. Be your own guru. Guide your own spirit. Master your own ascension. And now, showing you how, here's Jeffrey Daugherty.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Jeffrey Daugherty Show. This is Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower, and we're talking about Apostle Paul, Antichrist, my first book. And you know, I get so many people that write me, they tweet me, they go on to my Google Plus, and they just savage me. How can you possibly think? How can you possibly believe? What proof do you? Blah, 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 blah. Of course, they're all too cheap to buy the book or even the ebook to get the answers, and frankly the message is too important to wait for them to pick up some bottles or cans or get an allowance or something of that nature. So we do want to spread this message. I want to give you a blow-by-blow description. I've been doing that all week long. If you look at Monday's broadcast, we talked about how Alexander the Great shaped the Judaism in which Jesus and the Apostle Paul made their entry into this world. We also talked about on Tuesday's broadcast how Paul and Jesus had a connecting person in the person of Gamaliel, the rabbi, who was the unquestioned greatest rabbi living in their day and still has the reputation as one of the great rabbis of all time. And if you listen to those broadcasts, you'll see how Alexander the Great and Gamaliel tie into this whole story of Apostle Paul, Antichrist. And of course, the story is, as I have written it and seen it, and as people that we've talked about, a book forwarded by George Norrie, been on coast to coast, so it does have some credibility. But the story is that the Apostle Paul hijacked the Jesus message and the Jesus movement to create a fear-based control matrix which we still live under today. And basically the whole idea is saving Jesus from Christianity. So Alexander the Great spared Jerusalem, which allowed Judaism to continue, which prompted Judaism to adopt a great number of Hellenistic type of things, culture and religion. And then Gamaliel, who taught the Roman citizen Saul of Tarsus, and who was also, no doubt, among the priests that Jesus talked with when he was left in Jerusalem during Passover. And of course, Paul, with his huge ego, in my view, or at least his great hunger for truth, and perhaps your view, would certainly have been a part of that meeting. So it is beyond the realm of logic to suggest that Jesus and Paul did not meet one another on that occasion. I know you've been taught that they never met. Well, it's a logical implausibility that they didn't meet. Go back and listen to yesterday's show if you want to hear more about that. So we've got Alexander the Great, we've got Gamaliel, the rabbi, and then as we move on a little further in the book, setting the stage and laying the foundation for the message and the assertion of the book Apostle Paul, Antichrist, which is available at imnck.com, a new 410-page version. That's 50 more pages, footnotes, and annotations not included in the first edition, imnck.com. It sets the basis for this story and sets it firmly in fact and sets it in things, as in the words of George Norrie, that will give you a never before experienced perspective that may shock you. And they are biblical truths that we've been conditioned to for centuries that are getting turned on their head, and in many cases, truths that we have never heard. Truths about Paul and Jesus meeting when they were young. Truths about how Alexander the Great spared Jerusalem and how it led to the Hellenization of Jewish culture. And that's what this whole thing is about. We're setting the foundation. We're laying the groundwork. So no longer can you jump on my YouTube or my website or send me flaming emails that say I'm not giving you any research, I haven't given you any background, I haven't given you any facts. That's what this is all about. And this is for those of you that do have a mind for truth, to give you an understanding of where this comes from. And it is arguably the most important message about Christianity since the Bible. So Alexander the Great, Gamaliel, and then when we move into the area starting to be covered in chapter 4 of the book, here comes another foundational, formational character to the story and to the events, and another one for which I've taken untold amount of heat and have been accused of making things up. Well, it's just not true. And that person would be one Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus. He was a person that had been exiled by the Roman Caesar. His mother had managed to run afoul of the Emperor Caligula, which wasn't any rare occurrence. But as a result, she found herself in exile. He found himself not put totally into exile as a prisoner, but he was shipped off by his demented uncle and was farmed out to one of his aunts. And he lived with her. And then his mother managed to get herself back into the good graces of Roman society. In fact, she had made the miraculous recovery to have now been married to the new Emperor Claudius. And this man, Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, was adopted by the new Emperor Claudius, his mother's new husband, and he also had the good luck of being older than the emperor's real son, and as such was first in line to the throne of Rome. So here's a guy, survives the exile of his mother, has the good fortune to be put back into not only Roman society, but to be put next to the throne of emperor. And this was a man who was given a new name, and his new name was Nero Claudius Caesar Drusus Germanicus. That's the story of the Emperor Nero. How fascinating is that? How many of you knew that story? And that is a factual story. There is no extrapolation on my part. That is just something that happened point blank in the life of Nero. Now, the question comes in, so what? You're talking about Nero. Why would we even care about it? Well, the very interesting thing is that this person, Nero, of course, who was to go on to become the infamous leader of the Roman Empire, he took a trip to Tarsus in his childhood because his teacher, who was named Seneca, his teacher went to teach and to share a seminar with the man that was his teacher, and that person's name was Athenodorus. And interestingly enough, Athenodorus was the teacher of a young man in Tarsus whose name was Saul. Are you following me on this? Nero, who was about 10, 15 years younger than Jesus and Paul, Nero was a student of Seneca. Seneca was a protege of Athenodorus, and Seneca traveled to Tarsus to put on a seminar with Athenodorus. This we know by fact. This we know because it just happened. This we know because it is just the way history records things as happening. Now, again, I ask you, if Seneca comes to Tarsus to teach, it's customary for them to bring their brightest pupils. And if the learned Seneca is coming to Tarsus to teach, then of course Athenodorus's most learned scholars are also going to be there. So here again we have a dramatic, almost unbelievable confluence of history, which you think about it, the roads, the streams of time swept Saul of Tarsus into a place where he would have met Jesus personally, and the same streams of time swept Saul of Tarsus into a place where he would have met Nero. So Paul, Saul of Tarsus, not only met Jesus as a child, he also met Nero as a young adult. And as this book, Apostle Paul Antichrist, goes on to unfold, that began a relationship that led directly to the formation of the control matrix that is outlined in Apostle Paul Antichrist, my new novel, the second edition of it, 410 pages, 50 additional pages with footnotes and annotations. Alexander the Great, Gamaliel, Nero, Jesus, Saul of Tarsus, facts, historical occurrences, ideas and thoughts you have never even considered, laid out for you, and very easy to understand, very easy to comprehend, and very, very difficult to ignore. Continue to listen to these programs or purchase the book at IamNCK.com. Until tomorrow, this is Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower, and I'm wishing you peace and light.
Stay connected with the largest spiritual network on the planet, www.IamNCK.com. On Facebook, Jeffrey Daugherty and Jeffrey Daugherty Show. And on Twitter at NCKabala. Visit IamNCK.com today and learn how to create yourself and live the life you'll love.